up on our website in what is called a time code calculator that allows us to use three different modes. There's three different ways this calculator can be used. One of those is to tell us where to look into the past to know what experiences we can expect in the present. In other words, what dates in the past lay the foundation for what we can expect in 2012. And once we have the dates, then we can look at the history of the Earth. We can look at the ice cores of Antarctica in those dates and see what was happening in the Earth. We can look into the archaeological records of past civilizations and see what were people doing during that time. And those are the kinds of things that give us facts and a realistic expectation of what we can expect in the near term now and beyond 2012. And when we come back from our next break, I think if you'd like to go into more detail, we can talk about what those cycles tell us and what they show, and a little bit about how to use the calculator if people are interested in doing that.
Yes. I think we have time for... Okay.
I'm showing the bottom of the hour, and that's when they said we would take a break. So
yes, we've got a couple more minutes before the break, okay?
All right.
So maybe you could just begin to talk about these hot dates that hold the greatest threats of war, peace, economic cycles. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. The time code calculator can be used a number of different ways. One I just mentioned allows us to look into the past to see what dates lay the foundation for what we can reasonably expect. Another mode allows us to choose significant dates in the past that began the cycles that we're now living and tell us when those cycles repeat. So we can look at 1929, for example, was a seed date for economic collapse on a global basis. 1914 was a seed date for global war on our planet. We can look at 1861 was a seed date for civil war in the United States of America. These are all seed dates that set into motion patterns that repeat on a regular basis. And using the calculator, it will tell us when we can reasonably expect these conditions to occur again. It also works for really good things, for periods of economic abundance and for success. We rarely get stuck in patterns of joy and abundance and success. We don't say, we don't complain about having too much joy and abundance and success in our lives, but the calculator tells us those things as well. So the reason I'm mentioning all of this is that when we look into the last 100 years, the seed dates for some of the most frightening events that define the world as we know it today, they all repeat within the next 12 to 18 months of this broadcast before we ever get to 2012. And the beauty of knowing that is because each time the seed repeats, it brings the opportunity of what is called a choice point. And in a choice point, it's the opportunity to reset the patterns that led to those frightening conditions so that they never have to happen again.
Today we are talking about fractal time with my guest, Gregg Braden. Gregg is a New York Times bestselling author and known for his work in bridging science and spirit. His newest release is Fractal Time, The Secret of 2012 and a New World Age. We are taking I don't know if we'll be able to take questions or not. I'd love for Gregg to be able to take questions. We're so in a conversation, so we'll see what the flow is. But you can send instant feedback at psychiconair.com, and possibly we can get questions into Gregg. So, Gregg, you there?
We should be healing and transforming the hard drive of the computer in the studio that crashed while we were having our conversation.
We're pioneering faith today.
Okay.
This is so.
I definitely want to pick up with where we left off before our break, because this is a really important concept.
Yes.
And I think it helps us to understand the significance of where we are in the history of the cycles in our civilization. So are you okay if we tie into that quickly?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
What our own scientists tell us, what physicists tell us, is that when a cycle begins, I'm just going to share this a little bit more detail. When a cycle begins, whether it's a cycle in our personal lives of love and betrayal and loss, or success and abundance and joy, or a global cycle of war and peace, or an economic cycle, regardless of the scale, each cycle begins with an event, the seed, S-E-E-D, event, that sets into motion a pattern of energy that will repeat with a rhythm on a cyclic basis. It means if we know when it begins, we know when those conditions will repeat. I have to be really clear about this. It doesn't mean that the same events are going to repeat. If 1929 is a seed date for global economic collapse, and that cycle repeats this year, it doesn't mean that the events must occur. It means that the conditions make it easier, make it more likely for those things to occur. So the seed begins the cycle, and at the end of each cycle, before the next one begins, there's a place where neither exists for a brief period of time, and that is called the choice point. The choice point. This is a term that was coined in physics in 1958 at Princeton University. And if we know when the choice point is, this is the value of the time code calculator in looking at the cycles. If we know when a choice point occurs, then that is the moment in time when our choices have the greatest potency to change the pattern of the past, the frightening patterns, the destructive patterns of suffering, personal and global. And the reason I'm saying that is because 2010 and 2011 happen to represent a window of time where some of the most destructive and frightening patterns of the last 100 years, where those conditions are repeating, the cycles, the fractal cycles are repeating. So 1929, for example, we mentioned this earlier, the first time we had a global economic collapse. 1914, the first year we had global war. 1861, the first time we had civil war. 1941 was the first time the United States of America was surprised and attacked on American soil. All of these cycles, and there are others as well, as different as the seed dates are from one another, all of those cycles are repeating within the next 12 to 18 months in 2010 and 2011. So at first it sounds scary, and then we realize that what that means is that in 2010, 2011, the choice points to forever walk away from those conditions are coming up for us as individuals and collectively. We have this rare opportunity at the end of this cycle to redefine the patterns of war and suffering and disparity that have led to those things in the past. And the fractal time calculator, the time code calculator, tells us when those cycles are going to repeat. Now, I just want a little aside to this. I developed this work was the result of probably 26 years of research using the principles and the mathematics of nature to help us understand the cycles. It was late last year in 2009 when a gentleman approached me at a conference after I had shared with the audience what I'm sharing with you right now. And he asked me, he said that he identified himself. He worked for a civilian think tank who is also looking at cycles with big computers and very complex mathematics. And he said, where did you get your cycles from? And I told him they're cycles of nature and how I arrived at these. And I said, why are you asking? And he said, because you're using your cycles, we're using ours, but they're both pointing to the same things, that these next 2 years are really pivotal years in the redefining the events that have shaped our world in the past. And the reason I think all this is important is because when we talk about 2012, so many people are waiting for that date for something to happen. But if we look closely at what the Mayan science priests